This legislation, at the end of the day, is about looking after people and making sure that they go home safely to their families. And there are a lot of things that we ought to be doing in organisations higher up the chain in terms of preventative action that are designed to ensure that outcome and deliver that outcome in a more effective way. And fall prevention is one of those classic situations where a lot of the time our mind goes straight into lower order controls. Personal protective equipment by another name, which is like fall arrest equipment, for example, harnesses. We talk about harnesses as being synonymous with fall prevention, but really you're now talking about the lowest order of control in terms of the hierarchy. What you really want is to have more passive controls in place to make sure that people don't have to think about whether or not they're going to fall or not, because they're prevented from falling through preventative barriers and edge protection and those type of measures. And they should be at the fore of the approach that you take to managing health and safety in this area. That's the way in which you protect your legal liability. That's the way in which you make sure that people go home safely to their family, and that's the happy marriage between compliance and safety. But if you're overly focused on compliance, well, you're being driven by the wrong values. In relation to fall hazards, there is a hierarchy that is prescribed in the regulations, and people are required to look at higher order controls like passive controls, passive protection in relation to fall prevention before they look at other more lower order controls like fall arrest equipment and administrative controls. They've got to be done in combination, but there is a prescribed hierarchy by which you must look at those issues. Now, in that context, fall prevention has been singled out in the regulations as something that is so significant that it must be dealt with comprehensively. And in that way, it is different from other risks that haven't been singled out in that way. It all forms part of your duty of care, but it is such an important risk that the regulators thought it was fitting that there will be a special provision in relation to it. Well, if you don't follow the hierarchy in the order that it is set down in the regulations, you don't comply with the regulations, and you're technically in breach of the regulations. There are consequences associated with breach of the regulations. Usually, practically, that's enforced by way of either improvement notices or prohibition notices and or prosecutions for breach of your duty of care. It's going to be very hard to say, I have complied with my duty of care if you haven't complied with the order that is prescribed under the regulations. Because at the end of the day, there is some logic behind that order. That order is about reducing the risk as far as reasonably practicable. It's about putting long-lasting controls, putting things in place that will ensure that you're not relying on mere compliance by employees or people simply doing the right thing. We know historically that people make mistakes. It's not unusual for people to make mistakes. This is not some kind of news event or newsworthy event that people will make errors at work. Of course they do. There are a number of reasons why they would. Fatigue, they might be distracted, that they've got things on their mind. So relying simply on people doing the right thing is hardly a very effective system in the circumstances, which is why the legislation forces you to follow a hierarchy. That hierarchy is designed to rely less and less on people doing the right thing and more on systems that are foolproof, that prevent people from hurting themselves despite being distracted or despite being momentarily careless. That's the beauty of the design of the legislation. That is how the legislation tries to take such a critical issue that has contributed to so many fatalities over the years and make it an issue that is well managed in organisations.